get to this panel on data and security. We've got a few people whoa, what's this? Diego's going to be leading us through. Nice seeing you again, Senor Diego. I'm going to bring on my man, Vin. Dude, Vin, I got to tell everybody, Vin was about 2 years ago. He came up with the best quote ever, which is Kubernetes is a gateway drug. And now I think we need to update that quote. And it is GPT is a gateway drug to starting with machine learning. I'm just going to leave it there for you. I'm also going to bring on Sahil. Where you at, man? And Gregov and Shreya. Where are you, Shreya? Let's see if we can get you up here too. I will let Diego take over because he is the moderator of this panel. And there we go. All right. Looks like Shreya may have had some technical difficulties, so I'll bring her up on when she is ready. In the meantime, Diego, get cracking, man. Oh, you're on mute.
Of course, I had to do that one, right?
Yeah, I know how it goes.
I'm just following your example here.
That's the theme of the day.
Hey, everyone. So really excited about kind of leading this panel. So like the core of it is, as is in the title, data privacy and security. So, we've talked about some of these, what does it mean to, data privacy and security in the context of large language models? What does it mean to trust these new AI systems? So there's a lot of questions around, hallucinations, and I talked a little bit in my keynote around the, low affordability and like high affordability use cases. So without further ado, I have some amazing panelists here who are at the core of this on both. Is it fair to call it a previous generation of ML? It makes me feel so old. So I'm going to really quickly start and let them introduce themselves. So and ask you to, your name, what do you do, and kind of like give me one little thing about in the space what you've been thinking about. So you've all been thinking about this space a lot. So I'm a little nugget about it. So Sahil, we'll start with you since you're on my top right here.
Hey folks, thanks for having us. So my name is Sahil. I'm an engineer at U.com, which is a conversational AI search engine. And one of the topics I've been thinking about a lot is how do we best combine a lot of these advances in generative AI with advances in information retrieval?
Vin.
I'm Vin Vishishta, founder and CEO of V2. Been in technology for over 25 years, data science, machine learning for over 11. I do data strategy and AI strategy because, well, they wouldn't let me do any cool projects until I figured out how to get them paid and make people money. So that's now my majority specialty, figuring out how to make money with these models. What I've been thinking about is what comes after this, because this is just the beginning. And we've got probably a few other evolutions coming afterwards. Things like robotics are going to come to the front too. So that's what I've been thinking about. What's next?
Right. Gevorg.
Hello, I'm Gevorg Karapetyan. I'm co-founder and CTO at Zero Systems. I'm leading the both product strategy and the technological strategy. And what we do in Zero, we develop copilots for knowledge workers, which are augmenting them in very high value sophisticated tasks. And actually what we do, what we think the future will be in the intersection of automation of sophisticated workflows with foundation models, and we are super excited to see how the businesses are being transformed with this technology.
Excellent. Great. And finally, last but not least, Shreya.
Hey everyone, very excited to be here. My background is also in machine learning and a lot in like previous generation of machine learning, as Diego said. So I've been working in ML since I think 8 or 9 years. Everything from ML research in classical AI, decision making under uncertainty, deep learning. Also worked in autonomous systems and self-driving, doing machine learning and deep learning for a few years, and then was most recently the founding engineer at an MLOps startup, also doing like machine learning infrastructure, applied ML. I'm top of mind for me, and I guess also the reason that I'm here talking on this panel is that I'm the creator of an open source library called Guardrails, which, as you would expect, adds guardrails to the output of large language models and makes them a little bit more reliable and safe. Excited to be here.
Great. Awesome. So let's just start about like kind of like let's high level, like how should we think about the difference in some of these data privacy concerns that exist today between like kind of how we were building models and maybe a couple of years ago and now using some of these kind of foundational model APIs. Like how do we frame this? Anybody can go ahead. Like I'm trying to think how we should think about the framing here. Otherwise, I'll just pick on Vin because he's right there in front of me.
It's always me. How should we think about these? I think it's the biggest piece that's missing from the conversation is that we're not thinking about the patterns they can uncover. It used to be we could find fairly simplistic patterns, and the more complex machine learning and then eventually deep learning models got, the more complex the patterns that could be discovered. And so when we think about data privacy, data security with respect to these types of models, it's no longer the data itself. It is the patterns within the data that can be uncovered and create vulnerabilities for anyone that has a significant amount of data out in public. There's a study that was done by it was Cole Short at Pepperdine, where they realized they could, through some creative prompting, get these models to basically craft a VC pitch in the style of different VCs. And it was convincing. So there are patterns that are built into the data sets that we throw out there all the time on social media, and they allow for more than just our data to be learned. There are deeper patterns now, and I think we need to start thinking about the implications.
So Sahil, how do we think about, to kind of continue on that, I'll ask you, like, you're working on information retrieval and at a large scale. Like, how are you thinking about like the framing around these kind of like these patterns? Like, when do you think you can use these open generic APIs versus kind of like need to bring in models in house? Like, how do you frame that?
Yeah, no, I think that's an interesting point around some of these patterns and some vulnerabilities there. I think there's probably, in my head, kind of two ways in which we approach thinking about some of these issues. So on one hand, a lot of these models hallucinate, so they'll make up content. I think we're all aware of that. So in some ways, there's obviously a lot of technical work to be done on reducing hallucination, better grounding, essentially, a lot of these models. So that's one area. But then on the other side, just because something is hallucinating doesn't mean that it's not a useful tool for people. So I think it also is somewhat of a product question. So how do we make sure that people have the right expectations when they're using a product that involves a large language model, they can get the most out of it? So I think when thinking a lot about this type of stuff, those are the two angles in which I think a lot about it. It's not only a technical question, but also a product question around, what are the right expectations that, we present to people using these tools, and how do we make sure that they're not going to be misled and they know how to responsibly use it?
That's you bring up a great point in terms of like how to use it. And so I'm gonna move to you, Shreya, and kind of like maybe for the audience, kind of frame some of the challenges around hallucinations and kind of like how you need to think about it. And then obviously, tell us a little bit about your work in terms of what's your hypothesis here? Like, you obviously built this like fairly popular open source project that's having a lot of adoption. So very curious to hear from you, kind of like how you frame it in this context.
Yeah. I think hallucination is a very interesting problem. Like when people think about hallucination, it's actually, like a combination of problems that all kind of get grouped under this umbrella term of hallucination. I think like some of those problems are basically falsehoods, etc., or even like you have multiple conflicting sources and you aren't able to trust like which one is the golden source that you should kind of base your answer on. So it's a bunch of like kind of complex problems going on here. I think like grounding honestly is the way to go, is the way to kind of solve all of these solve very domain specific hallucination problems. So I do think that training better models, training bigger models, that are kind of like primed to be less susceptible to this is like one way to go about this. But at the end of the day, as all of us have worked with ML, we kind of know that it's really hard to kind of get that level of certainty with any machine learning model. And so being able to take something that is so powerful and then add constraints on top of that make it work really well for your specific use case, I think is more tractable essentially as a problem to solve, rather than just make hallucination go away as a blanket thing for LLMs. And so one of those things I believe people have touched on this before as well, but like is the way to go is you can essentially connect what you believe are like good data sources or good kind of like fact checking, either agents or tools or even just like embeddings of good data sources with your LLM outputs, and then any kind of like LLM outputs that are generated would get validated against those like ground truths. So that's kind of like the guardrails way to do it, which is that you use your large language model to generate something that functions, and then on top of that, for your domain, you think about like what are my constraints, and then impose them using like external sources or external data connections.
Got it. So Givework, I'm going to move over to Givework here on this one. So you work in a very applicable space, right? You're building for information workers inside enterprises, kind of like these assisted, like accuracy matters, trust matters, security and privacy matters. Like as you lead, like how do you think, like kind of what are some of the principles that you're thinking about today as you develop the product? Obviously, don't reveal anything proprietary or trade secret, but I'm very curious, like how you're thinking about it, because it has to be relevant. I mean, you're trying to get the trust of these enterprises to not only connect their data, but also like use your system inside their workflows. Like walk us through that.
Absolutely. So currently the enterprises already see and believe in the power of the generative AI, the power of the large language models. So it is like very close to them, like they can play with that, the ChatGPT for their like personal use cases. But when it comes to the enterprise use cases, and we are working with for large enterprises such as Fortune 500 companies, the largest law firms in the world. So their data is very confidential, and it's actually their clients' data. And they have like contractual obligations about how they're going to govern that data. And of course, like now there's like there's a huge like chasm between the opportunities and the reality. And what we are doing, we strongly suggest not to use the APIs like ChatGPT for the confidential data. And for those cases, just bring AI inside the organizations, because nowadays there are already a lot of great models for like several billion parameters you can bring inside the security perimeter of the enterprise, fine tune on their domain specific data, just give a product, iterate on the human feedback, and reach the level of the quality when the users will trust your system. So Diego, you're absolutely right. The trust for enterprise systems is absolutely must. In case they will lose the confidence in your product, you'll just ignore that.
Totally, absolutely. And so moving forward on kind of like the trust. So I think we have to frame one of the things I'm always kind of curious about. I've been thinking about, like there seems to be this people applying the kind of like the use cases to a one size fits all like framework, and like and it's problematic, right? Because there's times that like you shouldn't care, right? Go use an API, whatever's faster, cheaper, whatever gets you there. And there's other times that you should spend the time to bring it all, to your point, bring all the AI into the enterprise. But that has a cost, right? It can be expensive. You need to have knowledge and stuff like that. And so being able to do the back and forth based on like how you're thinking about security and privacy, and not applying everything with a one size fits all, I think is really important. I want to kind of push a little bit on the like what have you seen in the industry in terms of people, like, let's talk about that framing, right? Like how to think about the use cases, how to frame, how to, if I'm listening to this talk right now and I'm trying to bring some of these use cases into my organization, like how should I frame it, right? In terms of thinking about it, how should I break down the problem? Should I go in route A? Should I go in route B? Like, who can help me kind of like guide the kind of like questions that I should be asking myself in terms of like where to run this and how to run it? Any of you can jump in.
Yeah, so like one thing, like when you are currently thinking about the use cases, at first you need to understand that currently you need to put every single truth that you had in the future like under the question, because you had some understanding like what is solvable, what is not solvable, right? Now everything changed. You need to come to your business and understand which are like the major KPIs that will contribute to the growth of your business. Where are your obstacles, where the processes are sophisticated, you are spending a lot of money with less input, and understand if you can automate that and bring in the people who understand that, and they say, oh, with new technology it is possible.
Got it. Vin, you work on data strategy a lot. How are you, if I came to you today and I said I needed some advice on how to think about this, can you frame it for me?
Yeah, definitely. What I tell companies is, I tell them this is kind of an arc. There's a whole bunch of use cases that you could have, but they haven't been proven yet. And if you're not Meta, don't be first, because you don't have the capabilities, you don't have the background, you don't really have the domain expertise in this area to be the pioneer for a particular use case. Wait until someone else proves it out and then enter in. But that doesn't mean you have to wait till your competitors get into the market. You can look at each use case as a category. You look at the ability to service customers, and there's so much that you can do there. But you also, at the same time, have to be protecting your customers, which is not something most companies are thinking about. What happens when their customers submit a query across your website? Where does that go? How is it stored? What are the privacy implications that you're not thinking about? And that's why I say a lot of times you don't want to be the first company to do this, because you don't have that in-house capability to really, at an expert level, think about these things. But at the same time, what you should be doing is some really targeted opportunity discovery, thinking about different categories of capabilities and problems that you've seen solved in other industries, and then asking yourself, how could I apply that problem solution and fit it into something that I have in my current business? Internal use cases are always great for proof of concepts because you're banging on it inside and the risks are significantly lower than churning around. And you see, companies like Google did this, Microsoft did this. They consumed it internally and then they turned around and let companies externally play with it. And so a lot of these paradigms are what I'm talking to clients about now. But it's really important to be thinking through use cases and connecting to value propositions, not, well, it sounds cool, so let's do it. No, start with the ROI. If there's not a significant ROI, if there's not a big dollar value on the other side of this, why distract yourself from your core strategy and your current competitive advantages? You have to adopt this at some point. So you should be forward looking and prescriptive. But at the same time, it's all about the returns. If there's no significant use case that fits, that will deliver cash, don't do it.
Yeah, actually, I was gonna ask Sahil about his. So you work in search, you work in the future of search, right? And retrieval and personalization. And I'm kind of curious, like how you think about this goes. If one argues not only company but our personal data is kind of like the most valuable thing we have, right? But we obviously want to contribute that data to search experiences that are great for us. How do we think about what's the future look like? Can you guide us through that? In terms of how you're thinking about it at you, or maybe how you're just thinking about it personally. We can detach those two things if you want. But I'm very curious, what the future of personalized search looks like.
Yeah, I think it looks super exciting. I think that, I think the future of search is probably more exciting now than I think it's been in the last couple of years, last 5 years maybe. And I think there's a number of reasons why. I think a lot of it is obviously the recent advances in natural language processing, etc. I think when it comes to personalized search, I think it comes down to how, like, I guess when we think about, if we're thinking a little bit more into the future, um, you know, what can we do to really allow you to control your search experience? So I think that's something that will have a lot more ability to control. I think a lot of times now when we're interacting with some of these models, for example, just think of the concept of a system message. So when you're using, one of these models, there's this idea where you can specify a system message and it will basically, dictate how the model is able to adapt to that. So that in itself is a degree of personalization of AI that we have not been able to do in the past. So I think ideas like that basically will allow us to really personalize the results that we get from search in the future if we kind of apply that more broadly. And then also in terms of bringing your own data, I think there's going to be we have a lot of ideas, at least where we're thinking about building an open platform where other people can contribute their data and essentially what we call apps into search, and we'll incorporate that into our chat/search results. So I think there's a combination of open community efforts that can make it more personalized, as well as personalization enabled by technology itself.
Cool. So we're gonna go do we're gonna have to wrap this up, even though I could probably talk about this all day. So I'm gonna do one quick rotation through everybody, and I'm gonna ask you to either recommend a tool. It's totally fine to recommend the tool that you're working on, recommend a resource, or kind of like give a thought to the audience to go chase in terms of like how to be thinking about data privacy and security and trust in these AI systems. So Sahil, I'll start with you, and go that way.
Yeah, I guess maybe I would start. I guess one thought would be maybe just what you currently find these tools to be very useful to you right now. Where I think sometimes it's easy to think of tools as useful in abstract or maybe on a couple examples. But what are some ways in which you've been using some of these technologies and it's been consistently useful for you? And then from there, I think one can imagine what the future use cases will be.
Awesome. Gevorg?
Yeah, it's a great question. So since we have like a very a big audience here, so and I believe that not everyone started to work and experiment with generative AI and bring the applications via LangChain. So I strongly suggest to do that, because you'll be very impressed how fast you can have a great result. And then you already will have a good use case. You can already double down on the accuracy and user experience.
Great. Vin?
I would start looking at AutoGPT. The whole concept of self-healing, self-correcting, those are some really fascinating use cases. There's danger, but a lot of potential in that direction. So I would say look at those tools. If there's anything that comes out of this that I think becomes an exceptionally powerful construct going forward, that's the one to keep an eye on from a forward-looking perspective.
Got it. And Shreya, and I expect what you're gonna, what tool you're gonna expect it to push here. So do it. Totally happy with that. But explain why.
Happy to do that. So I can, I think I'm going to basically talk about guardrails, and I'm going to talk about it more in the context of like this idea that I want the audience to kind of like think about and like a take home, some take home inspiration, and like why guardrails kind of fits inside that. So I think essentially, we like these tools are these models are really performant, right? And we see like really interesting use cases and everything, but like, are they ready to be deployed into production where they can, work reliably, work like 100% of the time, and not, return like awful messages to your potential users, etc. Right? And so I think the idea I kind of want to share is that this isn't going to be this isn't sufficient enough to like actually put a lot of the applications that we're building into production. And the actual solution would be a hybrid of more traditional machine learning, more traditional like rule-based and heuristic-based methods, in addition to like large language models. And I think like that kind of gives us both the performance as well as the kind of reliability, safety guarantees we care about. And I think that's a very powerful construct of like ensembling those two kinds of methods together. And so in that context, I think like guardrails is a good tool that I wouldn't push. Obviously, I'm biased, but I think it's a great tool that allows you to kind of like get a lot of those guarantees straight out of the box. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, hey, thanks all of you for a great panel. I believe we're here wrapping up. Vin, Gevorg, Sahil, and Shreya, thank you so much for taking the time. They will all be in the Slack channel for the conference. We'll also share the links about what we what was talked about today. Demetrius, back to you.
All right. Wow. That was special. So I knew it was going to be good. I'm not going to lie. You get this many hard hitters in one place on one virtual room. And what do you expect?